Welcome back to Kevin Pollak's Chat Show. I am, as always, Chat Show. How are you? How the hell is your life? Are you getting through the holidays okay? I want to hear all about it from you. Write to us at kpcsfanmail@gmail.com. We're coming to you live today, live to tape, as it were, the same way they did the Carson Show, the Merv Griffin Show. I'm dating myself, of course. The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, live to tape. Sometimes he does 2 in one day. Wrap your brain around. So Jamie and Sam are not here as we come to you from Airwolf. But my guest is, and we have the better of the engineers. Every time seems to have a different engineer. Are you allowed to introduce yourself? Is your mic hot?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, tell the folks.
Yeah,
please.
Brett. Engineer Brett.
Engineer Brett.
I'm the lead engineer, actually, so you called it exactly.
I did. And
let's be honest.
They don't mess around with titles like that, Brett. I mean, listen, I don't even have lead host on my job description. So, Brett, thank you. What can I tell you? News. After 11 days in existence, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Comedy, which is the world we live in now. Apparently, if you're just in the calendar year of 2017, it doesn't matter that it was November 29th. And that, as well as the lead, Rachel Brosnahan, that took me 17 attempts to say correctly. I don't know why. The spelling is a little hinky. I'm going to go with hinky on Brosnahan. I may still be mispronouncing it. Rachel, the lead actress, who's a wonderkin. She's a phenom. If this were sports talk, which it isn't, thankfully. My guest today has a new movie that you've seen promotion for. If you've not seen the film yet, it is poised as a big Christmas comedy release. It doesn't take place at Christmas, just that's the season it's being released in. And every now and then these the timing sort of lines up. We'll get into details about them because it's been a long road. But I'm very excited to have Mr. Larry Sher here. Maybe I'm not even saying sure correctly.
No, it is.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Because there could be sheer.
Yeah, everyone wants to say share, sure, sheer.
Right. The two
sure.
E's.
It's
two
like,
E's.
sure, I'm sure.
I'm sure I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm sure that's
and Larry,
fine.
I'm saying correctly. Yeah.
No, it's actually Larry.
Damn it. Larry, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be here, Kevin.
Yeah. Let's talk first about the
aces that got cracked the other night at your poker game.
Here's good news. So there's a 3-table monthly tournament that I play in also, where in someone's home they set up 3 tables and everyone buys in for the same amount, and then you can rebuy up to the dinner break, and then there's no more rebuys. There's an add-on before the dinner break, and then the last 6 remaining players start to get paid, and so I came in 4th and made back everything. It did really, really.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you.
It was super fantastic.
I'm still playing that hand over in my mind.
Yeah, the cracked aces?
Yeah, 2 hands before we were over, and my whole night went to pot.
Yeah, that is the thing about, there's one player in particular, Ross Benjamin, who will always encourage another orbit, one more orbit. Can we just go? And this is a guy who plays every week. There's going to be another game next week. We don't have to play until the paperboy arrives, because that was a thing once. But yeah, you have to be so careful in the last orbit, because you played so well all night for 6 hours, a long time.
That's why I don't like aces.
And then within 7 minutes, my sphincter tightens every time I get them. And every time I just am able to be done with it, either pre-flop or after the flop, before the turn.
Playing it.
It's like that time I tried to get you off the flush draw with over betting a small pot, and you were like, you just came into a lot of chips. So you were feeling free and loose.
That's where
which is a big part of the game
real
too.
Thing. That's where karma is real.
Because it comes back and gets you.
Yeah. I won on shit early, and then I lost on shit late. There you go.
Yeah. This is Poker Talk. Welcome back. It's such an unyielding an often unwielding of a game because anything can happen on every single hand, and if you've played enough, that's always in your mind. And letting go of that is almost impossible. So many players try to figure out when they have a great hand how they could possibly lose. Instead of, clearly, the way everyone's playing in this hand, I'm dominating right now. But instead, so many of us go right to the math of, no, there's still a better hand out there.
Yeah.
And because we've seen everything. Right, we've seen the ridiculous pocket twos turn into quads.
And I'm actually one of those players that's unbelievably superstitious about even putting those negative thoughts in. Because I think if you think of the card that'll come to beat you,
never.
It comes.
Don't do it.
It comes.
No,
it's uncanny.
I keep them broad in the mind work suggestions. Right. If I don't want a paint card to come, I'll just say brick. In my mind, over and over again, brick, brick, brick.
Yeah.
Anywho.
All right. We'll be back. I'll live to fight another day.
Oh, hell yes, you will. So at this 3-table tournament last night, I sent you a photo because they had Monday Night Football on the television screen, and during the broadcast was yet another commercial for your film that we're here to celebrate.
Figures.
Father Figures, yeah. So let's start with. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Because getting a film made and then going through the studio system of getting it into the hands of marketing and then what they can do to you in terms of, well, now we're going to do this.
Yeah.
You succeeded as a filmmaker in casting beautifully, shooting wonderfully, editing magically, but now we've got another department here called marketing, and we have a thing or two to say.
Yeah, and I learned that firsthand. I've learned a lot on this movie, more than I ever expected to, and
or wanted to in some cases. Like my good friend Todd Phillips, who I've shot 5 movies for because I was a DP for years. This is the first thing I've directed. Cinematographer out there, for those of you who are thinking double penetration.
Yeah.
You never know with my audience.
That's right.
Yeah.
He has actually shown great empathy because he said, I honestly have never seen a first-time filmmaker sort of been run through it all. He's like, I've had pieces of all of these things throughout my movies, but you seem to have gotten it all in this one movie. And partly when I go to Woe Is Me, I then every day will see something in the trades about some new filmmaker who has great films behind them, successes, all these things that still has some like terrible things happen in post.
Yeah.
That I go, okay, you know what? It's not just me, it's everyone, and it's the hard truth of the business.
The unfortunate good news, they're only, I don't want to say meddling because it has a negative connotation. They're only rolling up their sleeves and getting over-involved because, and this again is the good news, they like the product and they see an opportunity for megabucks.
That's right. And they are spending.
And they are spending.
And just to catch up the audience to the history of the film, right? So it comes out December 22nd. It was formerly named Bastards.
Yeah.
And that's a story we can get into in a second on the sort of the name change. But it was previously going to come out January 26th. And last September, they basically said, we're not going to come out then. And then I went into a little bit of a state of purgatory until they finally landed on December 22nd. And thankfully, the date is fantastic. They are paying. They actually do see great potential in making money on it. And in the end, this date is fantastic.
It's unbelievable.
It just took a year of waiting.
Yeah, when you get that news a year ago, September, now 15, 14 months ago.
I was apoplectic.
Because there's
I was yelling at people.
There's an adage in the history of show business, which is a delay equals disaster.
Disaster.
It's never a good thing.
Well, and you, whether right or wrong, and only the audience and the sort of audience en masse can prove this either to be true or not, you do feel like it's like a huge L or a huge like this movie doesn't work stamped blazingly across the movie because you believe, as we all do when we see those things, we go, can't be good.
Right.
Movie can't be good. You don't move the release date twice, you know. Because we actually had an initial release date of November.
Oh, no.
And Ivan Reitman, who obviously we all know and is a genius filmmaker and all that,
Sure.
was afraid of Doctor Strange. And on paper, something to be afraid of. And they're like, we may finish 4th going up against Doctor Strange. In retrospect, the 4th place film on the weekend Doctor Strange came out made something like $17 million, which would have been the 2nd biggest comedy opening of the year. So there was a lot of money on that November 4th original release date. But that's fine because that was sort of before they even talked about when the movie was released.
Right.
So in my mind,
Yeah.
it's like they just kept punting the movie, and I'm in great fear of the optics.
Sure.
of
And how many
like-
people are thriving on the internet, waiting for information like delayed so that they can instantly be snarky? Well, this film's doomed.
It's a snarky world.
Because it used to be 1 or 2 journalists that would
Yeah.
even know about such a thing. And now there are thousands of trolls waiting for this information.
Yeah. And it's also as a human being, I sort of read the stuff and I make the same assumptions, you know? I mean,
Of course. It's just never a good thing.
it never seems
And
so.
now it
And then I
is.
had to find the ones like World War Z, right?
There you go.
They reshot the entire 3rd act, like a movie which was in trouble. Huge success. So I look
Ginormous.
towards those and I go, okay, see? But I also knew the movie I made. And the truth was, the movie I made worked from the beginning. And I'm the kind of guy, terrible cheerleader for my own stuff, but I also went into making a movie with the full understanding that it may suck. And I could fail. Like I went in going, I like the script, I love the actors I've put together, but first-time director, it could fail and it could suck and it could be my fault. I was fully aware of that. I had no sort of preconceived notions that I was going to deliver a miracle or something like genius. I just wanted to deliver something that worked. And I can tell you without any sort of overstatement, the first time I screened the film to a test audience, it worked.
Bananas.
And it worked great. It worked great. Then comes in, and that's another conversation, but we can have it about the whole testing process.
Yeah.
Because then you go into a place of like, the movie works, and it works really, really well, but they just want it to work a little bit better. And
That's
then
right.
it's like, what does that put your movie through to chase
2 or
3 or
3.
4 extra points?
Right.
Whatever
So-
that means.
So I like to tell the story from the terms of test results. After great filmmaker Barry Levinson, who changed the course of my career early when I was cast in his film Avalon. It was the 3rd Baltimore set movie for him, Diner, 10 Men, and then Avalon. Well, he had just come off the success of Rain Man, which was a project that had been around for 10 or more years, went through several directors, several casts, troubled for 10 years. No one knew how to wrestle this beast. And Barry delivered an amazing film that won an Academy Award for Dustin Hoffman and so on and so forth. A lot of awards, Golden Globes, everything's exciting. His next movie is Avalon, which is a very personal story, but it's a saga. It's big. It's beautiful. Alan Davio, one of the great cinematographers in history, Academy Award winner. But it's a very Jewish story. The immigrant story of coming to America that, then talks about assimilating and changing last names and moving from the city out to the suburbs and the next generation joining a country club and changing the name and all these various family things. It becomes this giant saga ultimately as a story. Randy Newman on the score, and it's to many fans of Barry Levinson, it is his masterpiece.
Yeah.
So, but everyone knows it's not going to make a lot of money. It just isn't designed that way. So the studio wants to test the film. And Barry is able to pull off a meeting with them to discuss that. And his sole purpose of the meeting is to deny them a single test of his film.
Yeah.
And they, of course, don't understand what language he's speaking. He produces a 3x5 card from the previous test of Rain Man, or from one of the tests of Rain Man. And it was one of the test audience members. They were asked to fill out these cards with a single comment. And this card that he, I think, has framed now, that he brought to the people at the studio that made Avalon, is a test card from Rain Man, and it said, "Hey, why didn't the little guy just snap out of it?"
He's got a point.
My favorite part might be "Hey, comma," by the way.
Exactly.
A little handle to get into the sentence. Hey, why didn't the little guy just snap out of it? Well, so Barry hands him the card and says, "This is why you can't test my film, because he gave his reasons." So the testing of films, I've had filmmakers on the show, and a lot of them have talked about the benefits from finding out what an audience thinks.
Yeah.
As a recent filmmaker myself, I found the experience of watching a test audience react to the person running the test afterwards to be sort of designed to fail, in that you're asking an audience to go from a experience of seeing the film to then be having an opinion, and they've been trained over time, like many critics, if you don't have anything bad to say, don't say anything at all, because your opinion is now being asked, as opposed to the involuntary opinion for my comedy that I got when you watch the film.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. That's the great thing about laughter. It's truly involuntary. So there's no formulating, there's no time to decide what might not have worked for you in the entire picture.
Absolutely. And I found the process of screening the film amazing. And I would never, that part is essential. Yeah. And I would film the audience and I would run it simultaneously in the editing room, because you'd learn everything. Yeah. And so that's essential. You can't take that part out of the process. And strangely, as somebody who went to college, was an economics major, and is interested in the business of filmmaking, I actually hypocritically am intrigued by the data. Mm-hmm. The question is, how do you use the data?
How to use it.
Right. And what happened strangely with my film, and again, woe is me, the movie is coming out and it works, and I'm not complaining really at all. I'm more interested in the sort of analysis of the experience.
Right.
Because it's so common, is that we would watch the audience, and every single time we did a test screening, the faces of the producers, myself, everyone, were always like, oh my God, it's going to be this number, right? And I can even get into the technical stuff because I don't care.
Sure.
Even though people like to really sort of hold this stuff close to the vest, just so, in case your audience gives a crap, is they have these screenings and they have these two top boxes, right, which are basically, they ask you two questions right on the top of a card that's double-sided and asks you a bunch of questions about the film. And the first question is, how would you rate the film? And it's excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. Second question, would you recommend this film? Yes, definitely. Yes, probably. No, probably. And no, definitely not, or whatever, right? And that first one, which is they take the excellence and the very goods, they combine those two, and that is a score out of 100.
Yeah.
And
it's
on
called
average,
top two boxes.
That's right. And on average, and then the next ones they put the definitelys and they sort of put that together. I think it's just the definitelys on the next box. But nonetheless, so they say like an average comedy tests 75.
Right. And
then a hit comedy, quote unquote, is an 85.
Right.
And so everyone's sort of looking for that kind of over 85 number. And so we would walk out of our screenings and everybody was like, it's going to be an 86, it's going to be an 87, walk away, movie's complete, go with God, we're going to release the movie. And almost, I think every single screening, it was in either an 82 or an 83.
And that drove them crazy.
And it drove them crazy, like literally crazy.
It's already way better than the average.
That's right. And you're asking, now you have to ask a fundamental question is to what end are we trying to chase two more people out of 100 or really two out of, 4 out of 200 or 6 out of 300, whatever. We had 450 people on our screenings.
Yeah.
And then you go into a place that can be detrimental to the film. That's the truth, because it's a sweater and you take one little thread off and the whole sleeve can come off.
Yeah.
And it's a delicate balance. And that's when the process becomes frustrating. And as a first-time filmmaker, I had no reference point. So for me, it was very challenging to sort of be objective and then start to go like, start to look for those examples.
When do you stand up and have conviction beyond reasonable?
That's right.
Person. Yeah, because you've developed instincts, right? That's what I finally felt as a filmmaker was everything I've done, performing, writing, remember the Writers Guild since 87, editing my documentary, which was a Talking Heads documentary. So it was 10 months. I'd still be cutting now if there wasn't a Sundance Film Festival deadline that we were ultimately accepted into and premiered there. But there, it turns out the editing process, I'd always heard, when I had Christopher Guest on the chat show, it's his favorite part because it is where the film and story and performances, it's where everything is made.
Yeah.
And the music and the timing of every single moment can be second guessed till the end of time.
Yeah.
So once you get into that, let's chase 2 or 3 points, now you've got opinions that weren't in the trenches.
Well, and maybe aren't even filmmakers.
Maybe
they're
definitely
guys that analyze the data.
Yeah.
Right? And their job is to basically try to use data to figure out what is going to get those extra 2 or 3 points. Right?
So the economics background also suggests to your brain these guys do know what they're talking about.
Well, what I want to do is Watergate one of these companies, break in the dead of night. Are you with me?
Yep.
Break open the books and actually try to figure out the analytics. Because, yes, the screenings are important. Yes, the data can feed some information about maybe where your demo is, where you're going to make money, all important things. There are a lot of other people's money at stake here. And God bless, I was grateful and fortunate enough to get a movie made, not complaining about that at all. But as somebody who was interested in economics, I'm now really interested in that sort of the analysis of this. And I don't know, but I suspect I don't know if it correlates that much because Lord knows, being in this industry, we hear Baywatch tested 88. Well, was Baywatch a hit? No. Whatever, you name it. And you can come up with a multitude of things. My favorite one that I like to say, and I may have, it's hearsay, so it's like maybe it's not exactly this. But my understanding is Magic Mike tested 69, right?
Ironically.
Yeah, something in that, exactly. And Warner Brothers really didn't, and it was made independently, and Channing and Soderbergh made it together, but it did not test well, like somewhere in the 60s, maybe, whatever. But somebody at marketing at Warner Brothers said, it doesn't matter. I know the audience for this movie, and we can go find that audience. And they found it, and the movie was a huge hit, $160-some-odd million domestically. Magic Mike 2. So now they make a sequel because the first one was so successful. Supposedly tested something like 96. Unbelievable. Right. So now you'd think this movie is going to be the biggest hit of the century, and it actually failed.
Right.
So I go, wait a second. You've basically just proven that there may not be a correlation. Mm-hmm. And now I don't know, but I'm intrigued. But I'm intrigued because obviously I had to deal with some of it firsthand.
Well, here's one of the things I went through, and I'm very curious what your experience was. I remember being involved in a television program, and so we create this, cast it, shoot it, and now we're screening it. And they did this test screening, and the guy who ran the test screening comes back to us afterwards, and we start going over the results. And I said, well, you're going to test this 10 times, like with 10 different audiences, right? He said, no. No, we find that really it just pulls down to an average. And I said, okay, I need to stop you because I've been a stand-up comedian.
That's right.
Since I was, professionally, since I was 20 years old. So my whole life has been dedicated to gauging an audience, working an audience, knowing the room. And I can promise you there are no two audiences that are the same. In fact, I can do the exact same act, 5 shows over a weekend, and get 5 different reactions to almost every routine that I do. So what the fuck are you talking about when you say, no, there's an average and it all comes out the same? It's ridiculous, first of all. So they've got analytics that work with a varying degree of success and fail. And I will say the happiest I've ever seen anyone in my personal experience of show business since December is the 25th anniversary of A Few Good Men was Mark Canton, who was running Columbia at the time, came in, and this is the first time I heard the expression of top two boxes, came in after the first screening, which a couple of the actors were invited to because Rob Reiner, the filmmaker, was cool about it. And we were just in a waiting area afterwards. And Mark Canton comes into the room. And again, the happiest I've ever seen anyone in show business, and yells 94 top two boxes. I, of course, didn't know what he was talking about, but I saw Rob lose his mind. And it is sort of astonishing. Also, we've been living in a time where there are almost no executives left who don't need to point a finger elsewhere.
Sure.
Well, they'll take the hit based on their instincts and their decisions. And when you need to point a finger, that's when you need those analytics the most.
It's a CYA, right? It's cover your ass. It's like, well, we did everything we could to get it to an 86.
And so then I wonder,
it's not our fault.
Is that the tail that's wagging the dog? Is it CYA that is built into their decisions and their analytics? As long as we follow these rules, then we can't blame ourselves.
Yeah, it's a little bit of just like a business school mentality, right?
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really fascinating thing. And I think I wouldn't even take away the process of even doing the cards. I actually think it still has information that's valuable. It's like I read somewhere that Ron Howard said, the screening process is fantastic for me because I actually I have in my contract that I don't have to actually do anything based on the results. He goes, but I do things based on the results, but I get to make the choice.
Yeah.
So I can determine people are confused, this is slow, this isn't working, and I'll make those adjustments. But if somebody suddenly just chases down some path that I think is going to ultimately hurt the film, I don't have to make that decision.
Right.
Obviously, I wasn't lucky enough to have that.
Jon Favreau was one of the people interviewed in my documentary. We were just talking about working off your instincts and so on. And he talked about sort of this very thing about the test audience and having come from improv in Chicago himself and what an audience can tell you about what you think is funny or good. Because they don't know what you know.
Right.
And once you know too much, you lose the perspective of an audience coming in cold, knowing nothing.
Yeah, for sure.
And so he would say, I would get to moments in the filmmaking process fighting the studio, and there'd be certain lines in the sand with them, and I would say, we are not changing this. If you want to change this, fire me and hire someone else because we are not changing this. And they would take it to a screening, and the audience would go, this right here that you were just fighting for is horrible. And I would come back into the room with the other producers and say, okay, roll up our sleeves. Who's got any ideas on how we're going to cut this? So I think it's probably to your betterment on a whole, on a big picture, to your future as a filmmaker, that you had to go through
Absolutely,
this
no doubt.
much.
No doubt. Because there's actually the next film, nothing will sort of there won't be a new experience where I'll have to go, well, I'll know that exactly. And to Jon Favreau's point, that's absolutely true. And I witnessed that firsthand. But the other interesting thing as a first-time filmmaker, and even seeing it now, is the film also changes based on what the audience knows. Like when I showed the film before they had never even knew anything, they don't have no marketing, they have no trailers, they have no commercials, they don't know anything. It's a fundamentally different experience than the audience that will see it in theaters because they already are peppered with, and I remember Todd Phillips, who that screening of the first Hangover was one of the greatest screenings I've ever seen, but partly because people didn't even know Mike Tyson was in it. They didn't know there was a tiger. They didn't know there was
They didn't know anything.
They didn't know anything. And I remember Todd saying, we know the movie's going to work. We didn't think it was going to be a huge hit. I mean, like a massive hit. We knew it would work, but he's like, nobody could have predicted that. But he said, but nobody ever again will experience the film the way those people did that first test audience.
Oh, expectations are the worst.
He's like, because everyone will know there's a tiger and Mike Tyson. And the movie obviously still works. But that's also such an interesting learning experience because Suddenly now when I watch the film and it's with an audience that has seen a lot of this marketing material, I now see things I'd want to change. So it's like it's a constantly evolving thing. Not that at this point I want to change anything, but like you do. And then it's like, well, you would never stop, you know?
You would never stop. And also they're as we were discussing the other night, they're ruining a lot of films for people by marketing them to a certain audience.
Yes.
When in fact it's not a comedy.
No. This is in fact a comedy.
Yes.
And it has
Your
some
film.
heart.
Yeah.
And it has some emotional stuff that is always the first thing that, you know, when they sort of say, well, tell us things, you know, what you liked about the movie. And almost, you know, one of the top, they give you all types of analytics and I've read it all, is like, oh, it was surprisingly heartwarming or it was surprisingly emotional. But people really like that aspect. But that aspect's harder to market. And so it's interesting because you need to sort of tee it up as a comedy, which it 100% is. And it has some really broad things in it. But it also has some really genuine emotional stuff.
Which thankfully they're not marketing because you kind of do want to surprise people.
Well, that hopefully is the thing that then will be the thing that will recommend it because they go, all right, well, we knew those jokes were in there already.
I can't imagine anyone saying afterwards, what'd you think of Father Figure? I didn't expect to care so much. That really bummed me out.
Right. That bummed me out. Exactly.
Why did I have to care?
Right.
Couldn't you just make me laugh? What's with the heart crap?
By the way, maybe 1 or 2 out of every 300 people, you get those. It's the same guy who said, just get over it. Or the person who writes, I wish Joe Pesci was in the movie. I'm like, well, all right, next time we'll put Joe Pesci in. You must be a big Joe Pesci
Did
fan.
you get one of those?
No, but
you've
a friend
heard
of mine said, like, yeah, that was the one thing that the guy kept saying.
I
in
wish
the
Joe
focus
Pesci.
group. Yeah, it was, why wasn't Joe Pesci in the movie? And you're like, well, because
there are a lot of people that weren't.
Exactly, because it was due date.
Yeah. So let's go back to that moment in time when, as a longtime cinematographer, the genesis of I think I'm ready to take the helm.
Yeah, well, the genesis of I want to take the helm came pretty early because I'm not that good a cinematographer, frankly, because I think if I was going to be like an Oscar-winning cinematographer, I would really genuinely have to care about that image, almost in the way I've heard some cinematographers do, where they're a little bit like, fuck you, director. My job is to make this look amazing, or this, and it's like they're myopic in the way that they look at the image. I was never like that because even the first thing I ever did coming right out of college was I made a film. I wrote it with a friend. We produced it together. We raised like $57,000 from dentists and our parents and grandparents and all that. We went out and made the movie.
Always go to the dentist, by the way.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
kids out there.
They just have money to burn.
Oh, buddy.
So I always had a big picture of like the whole, and I always saw my job as a cinematographer, one, to service the director, service the film, of course, but it was always like if we could work faster because that's going to make the director's job easier, or it's going to make the actors work better, that's good. And I sacrifice a little on the cinematography, so be it. So all the while, I always was like, I would love to take a shot at directing because I'm already sort of carrying a lot of the load of picking the shots and the blocking and a lot of the sort of technical aspects of making a movie, but I was like, I would love to have the opportunity to just carry the weight of the movie on my shoulders. So that was stewing, but I had a lot I wanted to do as a cinematographer. I just wanted to get bigger movies, better movies, work on my craft, like literally just become better, right? And so that was going to take 20 years no matter what. Frankly, when it happened was I did a movie called The Dictator with Sacha Baron Cohen, who was the most challenging person I've ever had to work with, bar none. And I'm not alone. Still a genius. And I mean, I'm talking like I couldn't have, it just was a struggle. He's such a powerful force, but a really difficult personality. And those personalities exist all across the kind of genius spectrum, particularly of comedic actors.
Yeah.
And I've heard it of other people I've never worked with. I still am huge fans of them. And in spite of all of that, I'm still a huge fan of Sacha Baron Cohen. And he still makes me laugh.
Sure.
But it was challenging.
Yeah, and I haven't experienced firsthand, but I will predict the following. Comes off as very specific, egocentric, perfectionist behavior, but it's all driven by insecurity.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And Yeah, and a little bit of not necessarily being as sure of things as maybe I would have expected. Right. And that was sort of, in retrospect, is like, of course.
Right.
But, watching the work and being a fan, you think there's a level of like knowing.
Yep.
And that surprised me. And maybe that was just not me being compassionate to the fact that, of course, he doesn't know. He's trying things.
Yeah.
And there is going to be insecurity and all those things.
Anywho,
but the course of making that movie, and it was like a big movie,
Yep.
we shot for like 75 days. I just shot this Godzilla movie we didn't shoot for 75 days. Like, this was a big comedy, and I was exhausted. And I was just a tiny bit burnt out. And I remember thinking, this is now actually the perfect time, because I just was burnt out just enough from shooting that it either had to happen now, or frankly, I would just age out of it. It's
Right.
hard to just like, it's a young man's game, and and you have to find opportunities where they come. And I knew if I put my, if I sort of put my head to the stone and just went after trying to direct, I could get something going. But I also knew, because I'd seen it firsthand, is even in the best case scenario, it was going to take time.
Right.
And even this film, which frankly, I read it, interviewed for it, met with Paramount, who was the original owners of the script. It kind of happened fast, like maybe 6 months.
Right.
And then it's like, let's go get actors and let's go make the movie. And then Paramount sat with it for a year and a half, 2 years, not wanting to make it because they just had a studio head who wasn't in the business of really greenlighting that many movies.
Right.
So you live with that experience, and you're like waiting and waiting, and and so even this took 5 years. And this is one in the stories of how it takes to make movies was fast.
Mm-hmm.
It was fast. Like, if you think about it in process, it was always on a track to get made.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it totally stalled out, and still it was 5 years. So it's amazing. Yeah, exactly. So I knew it would take time.
Right. And how did the material come your way?
So I basically did a thing which I like actually switched agencies from like a very small just DP agent who I loved. But frankly, I was like, if I'm going to go after this, I need actually a little bit of a bigger place. It's one of those things where I made a business decision, which was probably in retrospect right. And I said, I want to direct. And they were like, well, we know, that's right. And so let's go there. And they put the script in my hands. They basically did the thing that when you go to a new agent, you got about 6 months.
Honeymoon.
Where they are like focused on you.
Yeah.
And in those 6 months, I read a lot of things. And I read this script. And I actually turned it down when I first read it. I turned it down because it was a little broader than I was sort of interested in.
Right.
But I said to the producer, Ali Bell, this is what's interesting to me about this film. It's about twins, which I'm a twin. It's about family. It's about kind of the lies that we tell each other. It's about like the way we don't necessarily relish our family in the way we should. And it's a journey, and it's a fun sort of road trip dealing with just our own human frailties, And I expressed sort of things that I'd be interested in, and a couple of things I thought this just is too broad. And it takes me, and suddenly it feels very much like a movie.
Right.
And I'd like to make something that feels a little bit more like the chaos of life packaged into a comedy.
Right.
And she's like, so go develop that. Change it. Like we bought the script. We like the script. We know the idea is going to stay, but just change the things you want to change. And then I spent about a year with the writer, and we just basically made it the movie that it became. And then it became really great because I had some authorship over it. I really felt invested.
Yeah.
All these little nuggets that were personal to my own life, I could fit in there.
Yeah.
And it felt like the movie that I now could invest as much time as it took to make it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience in the comedy I directed, in that the script I felt was in a lot of trouble. That it had this, based on a true story, that was great. But all the characters, there were a lot of douches and whores.
Right.
Is what I like to call them. People no one cares about. And for comedic purposes, character assassination everywhere you look just to get a laugh.
Right.
And I said, no one will care about anyone. And at some point, you even need to care about the plight of Larry and the Three Stooges, okay? You can't just watch them slap each other.
Yeah.
At some point, there has to be some emotional connection.
Absolutely.
And so anyways, when I went in, I pitched them, here's what you need to change and why. And that's what made the difference. And it was similar. And they said, okay, well then do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're going to invest so much time, even if it happens quickly.
Yeah.
That it's like, and frankly, just to be able to talk with the actors and cast them. And I know when the movie became a little bit more grounded, that became more interesting to Owen and to Ed. And so to Glenn Close, it just, it helped actually get those actors on board because they now understood the tone of it more. And even though there are obviously some big, broad stuff.
So did you get early drafts when it was not as emotionally connected or grounded?
Well, that was the thing I read.
No, I mean, did you get early drafts to these actors that you mentioned?
Oh, not a little bit. Right. A little bit. There was a time in which Jason Sudeikis, who obviously looks just like Ed, but was going to be involved. Mm-hmm. And there was some early stuff, and we went through a little bit of things like that to also try to deal with some of the stuff with him. But it started taking the movie, and some things were things I didn't necessarily agree with. And
so what elements were put in place first in terms of
Ed was first.
Casting.
Yeah, Ed was first, then Owen.
Right.
And then you're into the place that happens, which is like, you know, and I've now see this firsthand because I would always get calls from other directors who are like, I got Vince, I got, you know, Kevin Hart, we're making the movie in February, you know, and then August, it'd be like, I got Vince and I got, you know, some new guy. We're making it in August. It's like, and I just knew that even though you have those two pieces, you're not really making the movie until you're about 12 weeks out, and the studio is now going to make the movie.
Right.
And that's frankly when the real casting begins, and even big roles.
Right.
Like Ed and Owen were what made the movie get greenlit. Mm-hmm. So they were the linchpin of the sort of casting. And then I think Terry was next, then Glenn Close. Because Terry was a fictitious character called Jack Tibbs, who was a New York Giant. Mm-hmm. And as a filmmaker, I now realize in retrospect, not only was it good that it was Terry Bradshaw, because it was really supposed to be basically, Jack Tibbs was like a Terry Bradshaw mixed with Joe Namath type character. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, why not Terry Bradshaw? And that was fantastic because I had to fly for one day to Hawaii, and I brought my little DSLR Canon, and I auditioned him one-on-one. And because I have tiny hands, it's not all tiny like Trump would say, but it's like I got tiny hands, and I can't really throw a full-size football. It's like embarrassing. My favorite movie is Raging Bull. It's because De Niro has that whole thing where it's like, I got these tiny hands. And I'm like, yeah, I fucking know what you mean. Like, this is going to keep me down.
So that was your favorite part of the Raging Bull. Interesting.
Exactly right. When he's complaining about his hands in the kitchen with his...
Because I go, it never got me down. Hey, Ray. Hey, Ray. Never got me down, Ray. But no, you is when he said...
it's the hands. That's the thing. Some small thing. If you relate to the character, it's some of them specific.
That's right.
It can hold you through the whole movie.
Yeah.
But I got like a medium-sized football, and I had catch in his like kitchen pretending to have a catch while I was auditioning Terry Bradshaw, which I grew up a Steeler fan, so it was like next level dream. That was amazing.
What do you mean you grew up a Steeler fan?
I know. I grew up in New Jersey, which I should be a Giant fan.
Yes.
But I was strange because I was a Larry Bird Celtic fan.
Of course.
Because I'm racist. No. Just because I was
separate from the fact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't live in Boston, but no, Larry Bird was obviously my favorite player. And strangely, I was a Steeler fan. I think because it was the heyday of Steeler Cowboys.
Sure.
And I was like, the White Knights of the Cowboys just felt like, it felt like something that I wasn't. You know, Steelers felt like raw, middle class, and like sort of.
And how did you feel when
class.
when Jerry Jones said that the Cowboys were America's team?
Well, yeah, I think that was the
you?
other thing. That sure did. That sure did.
How did he not realize that all of sports are regional and no one gives a shit about any team?
Hey, it worked.
Outside.
It's like Notre Dame is America's team.
Right.
That's right. So strange. I was a Steeler fan. And
flipping out.
Now I'm sitting here in front of Terry Bradshaw and having a catch with him. And we went and played golf.
Oh.
And then we went and had dinner, and then I flew home. And I was like, oh, yeah. And he was great. And he's great in the movie. He actually was one of the better actors by far for the most simple reason is he always just listened.
Holy crap.
And he listened in a way that, like, I'm trying to think of, like, level of honesty here. I'll be honest because I don't know any other way, is Ving Rhames went to Juilliard and is amazing. because he's Ving Rhames. But we would do these things with all four guys, and Ving would come to me and go, they're not, I don't know when to come in because they're not sticking to the script.
Right.
And I was thinking, well, just listen and you'll know when to come in. Because Terry's coming in every time, wherever it's just, he's doing this thing. And it wasn't like crazy improv, but in the most basic sense. Yeah, he was just always listening, and he just was doing that. And it took, by take 3 or 4, Ving got into the rhythm of it. But I remember in the early part, it was like, it just was, and it may be because he came in for a quick day, and it's like a lot of words, and he's just trying to figure out like, what's the rhythm of this movie, which is always difficult. But I was surprised, and even J.K. Simmons, who literally just won the Oscar, texted me, and he's like, Terry is great in this movie. I think even he's like, and then,
Yeah.
He's like, I wish I was in the movie more. I'm like, JK, come on, give me a break.
Yeah.
It's like there's like the segments of dads. I wish all the guys were in the movie.
I'm gonna help accentuate the wonderfulness that is JK. So, also in the little film I directed, I and he had just won the Oscar and every other award imaginable, and we knew each other enough for me to reach out personally, and so. He said, yeah, sure, send me the script. There's only 2 days' work, but a very impactful scene in particular. Like the whole heart of the film. I mean, you grab people in this scene. And so I say, yeah, I'll send you the script. He says, I'm going on vacation with my family. It may take me a little bit to read it. And I said, just take all the time you need. So I get a call, and I do the math. He's in London, and it's about 11:30 at night or so in London. And he says, and he's telling me how much he loves the part and what he wants to do, and he's talking about lines.
Yeah.
And I say, well, yeah, we can get into all that when you have more time to worry about it. And he said, oh, no, I got time. We just took my family to the theater in the West End, and we're on the way to the restaurant right now. So I have... What?
I have time.
You're on vacation with your family, a guy who was working nonstop at that point. This is the time you don't need to talk anything. Just
he's like wants to get it.
And he said, no, I have a 17-minute walk to the restaurant. Let's talk now. Just lovely and
amazing.
Such a pro.
And he was so generous to me in ways that I'll eternally be grateful. In the way that he just treated me as a first-time director and just...
That's how I felt too.
And did things that, a lot of guys would fight with. Like, I just was like, all right, we've done these 3 or 4. I got this weird idea. Can you try it? And he'd go, yeah, sure. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
And just, I had worked with him briefly on I Love You, Man as a cinematographer, but the guy's amazing.
Yeah.
And he can do anything. Like, he can play the heavy, he can play this, but he also can play that really sweet.
Yeah.
He can turn on a dime. He's the real deal.
He really is.
Yeah.
He's extraordinary. What was the process of getting Ed? Let's go to the first pin.
The process with Ed wasn't as hard as maybe the rest, simply because I'd done all the Hangover movies as a cinematographer. So,
again, reaching out personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And he liked the script.
Right.
And he knew me enough and knew the way I worked that I think he felt comfortable. He didn't think he was taking too much of a risk, whereas other guys, I think it's harder to understand when you're walking into a first-time director what you're getting. Who's not an actor, who's not a writer, who's not, the cinematographer to director thing is fraught with a lot of guys that sort of, did one-offs, like Janusz Kaminski, who's Spielberg's cinematographer, tried it once, left it. There's like a handful of those guys.
Yeah.
And then there's guys like, Jan de Bont, who did Speed and all that, who kind of stuck with it, and that became their thing in the kind of action vein.
Right. Do you feel hooked?
Oh, yeah, I feel hooked. The thing is, and outside of feeling hooked, the one thing is I still love shooting, partly because in my heart, I'm like a shooter in the way that I would say an actor is an actor, right? So like Ben Affleck could direct Argo, but in his heart, he's also still an actor. And so it's interesting for him to go make Gone Girl or go do Justice League or whatever it is, because it's also like it allows him to maybe even be a better actor because he's now directed a couple of times.
Oh, for sure.
The tricky part about directing, and I obviously learned it, and every director knows this, is it's a process that takes time. And if I waited a year, 2 years, only as a director and did nothing in between, I would literally go crazy. And I wouldn't be able to survive.
Right.
Not just monetarily, I literally would just go crazy.
Sure.
Because it's like, I want to be on a set and I want to be making something.
Right.
So I'll probably keep shooting while I develop and figure out the
you
next
have
movie.
to.
But there are some people who don't. And
Right.
some people have asked me specifically, like, well, that's sort of weird. Don't you have to sort of draw a line in the sand? And I feel like, well, why doesn't an actor have to do that if they're directing? Or why doesn't a writer, or, you know? And it's like the juice. It's why I respect Soderbergh and some of the guys that are just like, let's go make movies. Soderbergh once said, like, if it took more than 6 months to get a movie made, he lost interest and he had to move on to something else.
Right.
He didn't have the stamina for like pushing that rock up the hill.
Sure.
For 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you know?
Yeah. Is he still shooting his own?
He is.
What do you make of that? Because I worked with Peter Hyams also, who was a cinematographer
Yeah.
and a director.
Yeah.
And it's astonishing to see.
Soderbergh, I get. I get it simply because the type of movies that Soderbergh and the style that Soderbergh, which is about, it's a little bit, he's really ripped away a lot of the artifice of it, even though he'll make things that are like, have a lot of production design, like The Knick. He's trying to make stuff, I think, in a way that I totally get it. It's like one less guy or woman he has to basically communicate to. And I'm forgiving of his want to do that because I totally understand why he wants to do it. And he's skilled enough to do it.
Of course.
You know, a lot of people are like, cinematographers like myself will go, he's whatever. I go, look at Solaris. I mean, it's not a great movie, but it's a gorgeous movie. And he knows what he's doing.
Well, my question is really base and from ignorance is bliss. Aren't you more able to see what's happening in a scene on a monitor than through the eyepiece?
Yeah.
That's the part that actually makes my brain explode.
Here's what I think is there's nothing better than operating, but that's more because there's like a connection to the actors. But I think as a director, and it's tricky because Todd, who's obviously one of my great influences, will watch a really small monitor and sit really close to the actors.
Right.
Right? And I think he's the guy I think has just the most sort of keyed in on all the sort of aspects of filmmaking that I've worked with. And but it's not right for me because there's still a part of like, sometimes what will happen is he'll be watching the performance and then I have to explain to him or somebody that like, well, that thing that you saw to your eye, it wasn't really captured on screen because maybe we were wide or whatever. And then I think, it's like rotten because you're imagining something that you're seeing through your eyes. Mm-hmm. And if the camera doesn't catch it, it's like it doesn't exist.
That's right.
And so I think the monitor is essential for no other reason except to understand that connection between the camera and the actors.
Right.
Right. And so for me, yes, I think, but even if I was shooting my own stuff, I would probably still
want to check
work off a monitor. Yeah, I would just, I don't know if there are times handheld and things like that I would operate.
Yeah. I had an experience in I got to work with the cinematographer Bob Richardson twice.
Yeah, A Few Good Men was like an early one.
Yeah, but Casino.
Oh yeah, forgot about that.
So I've got Scorsese, who, from my observation and lack of knowledge and experience, would, as I imagine it, look at the monitor and the composition of each setup. And he knew what he wanted in you put a graph of squares over the monitor, he knew what he wanted in every square.
Oh, that's cool.
To a point of perfection. And he and Bob Richardson, if they needed to take 3 hours to get that right, that's how long it took, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But then within that composition to perfection, the actors were given complete and total freedom to do whatever they wanted. So very little direction as an actor.
That's interesting.
So the scene with me and De Niro sitting at I'm in the movie like 9 minutes. There's one scene with me and De Niro sitting at a table before he realizes there aren't enough blueberries in his muffin and we go into the kitchen. But when we're sitting at the table, the way that De Niro and Scorsese work together, how they like to do it, is to do 30, 35 takes. And Bob tries something different
Wow.
every take.
That's a lot. That's a lot of takes.
It's crazy.
It's not Fincher 99, 100 takes, but it's like, that's a lot.
It's too many.
Wow.
It's too many. For me as an actor, it's too many. For me as a director, it's too many.
Me too. I'm in that sort of 5-6 range.
Yeah, because as an actor, I'm horrible. After 4 or 5 takes, I just feel like I'm acting. There's no more connection to the reality of the moment. Doesn't matter how much I listen. The repetition nature ruins the authentic feeling of what I'm saying.
I would imagine that has.
So when I hear someone like Clint Eastwood does 1 or 2 takes and says, all right, let's go, on a lot of levels it doesn't make any sense. On a letting go of perfection, it does make sense.
Which I think is important. You know, the enemy of good, it's like the perfect is the enemy of good.
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
It sure is.
Yeah.
So during those 35 takes or whatever, and by the way, it might have only been 22, but it was a ridiculous amount. After every take, I just remember at the edge of that table that, I could only call him Bob because it's insisted upon, Robert De Niro. At the end of every take, the little Scorsese head would be bobbing up and down on the edge of the table as he crouched down next to the table to look at both of us. I just remember the little bobblehead.
So super close.
And he would say, after the take, he would come in and he would say, so what do you think? More angry? Less angry? What do you want to try?
Oh, wow, he'd ask.
And so I know the trick. When a director wants you to be more angry, sometimes they'll say, so what do you think? Less angry or more?
Right.
Because they know they'll eventually get what they want. But I could immediately sense I was not being manipulated. He really wanted to know what I thought and what I wanted to do next because he wanted to see what we wanted to do.
Yeah, that's cool.
For a guy who was that controlling of his composition, that was the juxtaposition that was so surprising to me.
Well, and for such a master filmmaker, right? Like there is like that sense that master filmmaker
has to control.
No, he's gonna be so precise in every department,
right.
You know,
right.
And sometimes not so much
because he was able to capture the lightning in the bottle from the performance.
Yeah,
by giving them complete freedom.
And you see that. Well, you particularly see that of late more than I mean, I'm sure that was the case even going back to Taxi Driver and those early ones too.
Color of Money. There's moments in Color of Money that are the camera move is so dramatic and specific, but then you see Paul Newman or Tom Cruise do something. You're like, well, that just happened once.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
That's really all you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
It's like just something that is just. I always find like for me, I don't need that many of those moments in a movie.
Right.
3 or 4. And sometimes that's the movie for me. It's the thing I said about The Small Hands, or it's like I've found that if you can just connect to the audience on where they just suddenly, and often it's something really specific,
sure.
right? And the next movie I make and every movie, it's the thing I appreciate about what's going on in TV now.
Right.
You know, we were at poker talking about Smilf or whatever. It's like when I see somebody make decisions that are so specific.
Yeah.
That thing in Maisel. There were 2 things in I've only seen 3 episodes so far. This isn't a spoiler for people who haven't watched it yet, but they do this amazing montage with her where she gets out of bed and she gets herself undressed basically for the night after her husband goes to sleep in the pilot.
In the mirror.
Yeah, and she takes off all her makeup. She puts her hair in curls. She jumps back in bed, and then she wakes up before the alarm and she gets all the makeup back on. It's so
also
specific.
The blinds. She keeps the
that
blinds open 3 inches so the sun will come in the morning and wake her before he gets up.
It's so specific,
right?
That it just grabbed hold of me, and I go, I love this. It gave me such confidence in the people making the movie. And then in another episode, they do this workout routine where she's talking with her best friend,
and they're exercising in 1958.
In the most specific way. I'm like, how would they even if somebody remembered that, how would they remember those moves? It's like and I fell in love with it because it was so specific.
Attention to detail.
Yeah.
That is all I'm looking for a lot. And that I find too, that's what draws me in as an audience because I feel like I'm never being pandered to, and I feel like I'm discovering all those specific moments having not been led to them by the nose.
That's right.
Right? So, yeah, that's what makes a lot of that stuff.
It's that sort of it's sort of antithetical to what you would think, which is like you think you're making a movie for a really broad audience. you then homogenize all those decisions into something that's like universal. But if you make it really specific, it's strangely more universal.
It's weird because you're right. It's always the little tiny things that people will come up to me and quote from a movie I've been in that was a throwaway moment. But most of the time, those little tiny things that they notice mean so much to me because I chose specifically to do a little tiny thing.
Yeah. The funny thing about the Casino is obviously we were somewhat influenced by that for some elements of The Hangover, of course, and War Dogs as well.
I would think.
But we were just so happy because we shot Hangover, the scene when they're counting cards. We shot in the same casino pit.
Riviera.
Yeah, as Casino.
Pits.
But we couldn't shut it down, which I think is pretty normal because there's millions of dollars running through those pits. So we took over like 3 tables, but next to every table are real gamblers. And we shot that scene where they count cards, in The Hangover, and literally the table behind them is a guy playing roulette all night. We shot for 12 hours. He was there every night and the whole night going, 17! He wanted 17 to hit. And I swear it hit once, but he would yell, 17! So all the stuff got changed, but I can't walk into a casino now and see a roulette table without hearing, 17!
Yeah.
He just was like wasted and yelling 17.
It's like in Lost in America. You really like the number 22. Another one of those little tiny specific things, right? We promised to keep it to a certain time. We've flown past an hour without even thinking about it.
Did we? I'll ask just this question as somebody who now has to sort of hope the movie makes money. Did we make the movie at least sound fun? I know we talked about a lot of like the hazarai of making a movie, but
I will say that,
but it was joyous to make and it worked and it's funny. Here's the thing. I will just say this as somebody who's still trying to like sell movies is it's really it comes from a really nice place, both I think as a comedy, but also as something that I think will stick with people, and it's a really fun ride. And I say that just knowing what it is.
Yeah, the trailer does a great job of selling it as a comedy, and I think it is important to point out to people that there's a heart there within the comedy. That's all I cared about when I did my first and only directed comedy, because that's what I want as an audience. I want to feel something.
Yeah.
And then laugh a lot and then feel something. Keep me connected.
Yeah, this will do that.
And you've got thoroughbreds in terms of a cast. Let's go through them. The cast is kind of ridiculous.
It's kind of ridiculous. It really is.
We talked about Ed Helms and Owen Wilson as the two leads.
Yeah, and both of them, I think, also show a little bit of some layers and sides that we haven't necessarily seen in both
Those
of
are
them.
two not just astonishingly talented comedic actors, but they have heart and soul in their eyes that is not allowed in every film they do.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And they put it in this. And it's great. And they really got on in a way that I couldn't have predicted because they didn't know each other. So that was like
Chemistry is everything.
Yeah, and they really liked
They
each other.
hadn't met?
They had never really met.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Amazing.
That's magic.
Magic. And they liked each other in a way that like brothers do. And so that was fun. And that was, I couldn't predict it. And that made the whole movie and the whole experience really great.
Right. And then you've got Glenn Close as their mother.
Amazing.
And now there's a mystery as to who the father is.
Yes. Oh, yeah. The basic premise of the story is Owen Wilson and Ed Helms play fraternal twin brothers who are now 40-ish, and they have grown their whole life thinking that this father, who they have a picture of and they hold in their wallets, died when they were born. And then they find out when their mother is now finally getting married. She's older in her life, and she's getting married. The night of her wedding, they find out that, in fact, the father they thought was their father was not. And, in fact, the mom doesn't really even know
Could be
who
a
their
number
father
of
is.
guys.
It was the 70s.
This is what we did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she gives them a clue as to who it might be, and then that they set off on basically a road trip to try to, and that clue leads to other clues, and they basically are trying to find their real biological father.
And the potential fathers are J.K. Simmons, we mentioned, Terry Bradshaw
playing himself. We have, Ving Rhames is a potential in there, and then we have Christopher Walken. We have Jack McGee. who's he's a really cool actor
Love him.
from a bunch of things you've seen before, like The Fighter and stuff like that. I'm trying to think if I'm missing a dad. No, that's it. Those are the potential dads.
And along the way, there's a hitchhiker.
Oh, yeah, Cat Williams, which was amazing for me because I've always been a fan of Cat Williams' comedy, and he obviously comes with a certain reputation. He's a little like a loose cannon. And so I was excited by that. And he sort of falls into this sort of place in which sometimes the universe is like meant for you to sort of collide with people in your lives, and Cat Williams is one of them. And in my own life, too, the guy's really cool.
Yeah, and he's so good in the movie.
He's great.
Yeah.
He's like that guy that is always that first box of like, I love Cat Williams.
Yeah.
And what's fun is I think Cat Williams is in this place where he's certainly known to a lot of people, but there's plenty of people who don't really know him.
Sure.
And so it'll be nice for them to just almost discover a new person.
Yeah, I remember being at a poker table with Todd Phillips right before The Hangover came out, or he was somewhere in post.
Yeah.
And everyone in the stand-up comedy world knew who Galifianakis was.
Yeah.
And I remember Todd saying he's about to become really well-known.
Yeah.
And here's hoping that for Cat
Yeah,
Williams,
for sure.
right?
Exactly.
That would be great. I'm going to spoil things by making a prediction for opening weekend.
Oh, don't.
I won't.
It's
I won't.
hard. There's a lot of competition.
Yeah.
I had this Italian woman, I did the junket, and this Italian woman who I could barely understand was basically going, first of all, she asked me like, why are American comedies so bad? And I'm like, how
She's not wrong.
it? And then she said, there's so much competition. Don't you want to see The Post, which comes out December 22nd, which is Spielberg's movie? I'm like, yeah, I kind of do. I go, I'm just going to see it. I just hope people see it after they see Father Figures.
Yeah.
She's like basically pitching for The Post.
I'll get a screener. That's what you should have told
Yeah,
her.
exactly. No, I'll have already watched it.
Yeah. What are your experience was such that you're hooked, as we said, you want to do it again. The studio put you through a marketing experience to bring it up from a incredibly solid score to a slightly better, incredibly solid score. You went through all of that. You accomplished all these various goals. Now it is up to the audience to decide for everyone concerned whether or not all of that hard work and 5 years of your life will amount to what? I mean, that is the question.
Yeah, well,
what needs to come from this? The truth is, it's only pure evaporation that makes you second guess where you go from here. But even that, I would say, nah, not really, because you'll always have this film to be able to show other people in the industry as to what you're capable of. And so in terms of calling cards, yeah, there are a lot of people in a studio level that are going to go, the film did X, so we can't do that. But in terms of a calling card, don't you feel you've checked your own boxes to be able to hand this film to future employers and say, here's what I'm capable of?
Yeah, and also to myself, for sure. And I have to sort of always remind myself that it's a time for celebration, because it really is like it's hard for me to do that on a general level in life, is to sort of remind yourself that like it's okay to celebrate.
I want that
celebrate
for you.
The accomplishment.
I want to let
I
go
feel
of
that. Yeah,
expectations, and also
and it's out of my hands as well.
It's completely out of your hands. Yeah. And then there's that other thing that sounds obnoxious but is painfully true. It isn't the destination; it's the journey.
Yeah, well, I had like a tarot card. Like literally, I moved to Los Angeles from New Jersey with like my best friend from college, and we drove across the country, stopping in places where we knew people, right? For my brother in Emory and like all across the country. And we stopped in Denver, and there was a friend of his that read cards, basically. And so I was 21 years old, and he read that precise thing from me. He just said, it's all going to be about the journey for you. It's not about the destination. And it's stuck with me. I know it's not like I do that often. It's the only one and only time I've had my cards read. But it was actually like kind of, to hear that at 21 was kind of, it released me.
Yeah.
Because it kind of, even though it's like nice to believe in those kind of things sometimes, because it gave me the ability to just not worry as much. And as a filmmaker and as an actor or a cinematographer or director, the experience often is, for Owen particularly, Owen is one of those guys that the experience of making the movie is the movie.
That's right.
It's not the result. He actually doesn't even watch his own movies. And so, and for me as well, because I've made movies that are some of my, well, we did a movie together. The Big Year was literally, with David Frankel, was one of the favorite experiences I've had making a movie. Like, really was. It was just, like, for me, it was a really joyous and challenging experience. Nobody saw that movie.
Right. So
and I still have such fond memories of making it.
Yeah, so there's a perfect example of how the destination just doesn't matter. It truly doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that's why I was trying to push for, is this the calling card that allows you to continue forward now that you're hooked to be a filmmaker? So. Well, it is.
Yeah.
So that's another reason to let go of the destination. And also, the destination is death. As it turns out, the destination is death.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so everything that happens between now and that destination is
also a good way
is
to think
the
about
journey.
It. Yeah,
there's no getting away from that.
So don't look forward to the destination.
No, we want to put off the destination. The destination is not the release of this film. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Absolutely,
it truly isn't.
Yeah.
So you did right by yourself. You did right by a studio. You now have a calling card. You enjoyed the experience. You've checked all those boxes.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's the celebration I wish for you.
Yeah, and I actually, in spite of like my own insecurities, I actually still really like the movie.
Yeah,
I really do. And I sit through it every single time.
That's not easy to say.
Yeah, and no, I know. And Todd would say, you're never going to want to watch this movie again. You've seen it 30 times, 50 times, 100 times. You'll be in the lobby, smoking a cigarette.
And you don't even smoke.
I don't even smoke.
Yes.
And yet I strangely, it's like,
because there's certain moments.
Yeah, I enjoy the guys, and there's like, it's the little things, that like still bring a smile to my face. So I end up always sitting through it, and I always feel good when the movie's over. And I've watched it with an audience. And so we have the premiere tomorrow night. I'll be more nervous at that than I think any other screening, maybe because it's like peers and other industry people and stuff like that.
Nervous that
this will be the one time it doesn't work. I don't know, seriously. Because
you are creating an impossible situation that you're nervous about.
Oh no, I know. It's like I'm Jewish, so I could be nervous about something.
You can't blame a people. You can't blame a people. This is all your baggage.
That's true.
Yeah. And also, even for the people who don't like it, you're going to get the same response. It's show business.
Oh, well, that's true.
So they're going to say, "Man, it really looks like you had a lot of fun making this one." Look forward to that compliment and know what it means.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing as much as you have. It's all I can ask for, quite frankly, that you're candid about your particular journey, and you checked all of my boxes. So I thank you for that. We just have one last thing that we end with, which is, there's two. Ask Kevin, which is where you're allowed to ask me any question. It can only be one. And I have to answer it. And then the other part is a multiple choice, the chat show pop quiz that you'll have to endure. So first we'll do Ask Kevin.
Where your girlfriend Jamie?
Yes.
Where did you meet Jamie?
In her hometown of Pittsburgh.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Oh,
she cares more about her Penguins than her Steelers.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
hockey fan.
Fortunately, they did win the Stanley Cup the last 2 years in a row, so that's been pretty good for her. Yes, in her hometown of Pittsburgh.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Yes. I raised her as one of my own. She's corn-fed. And now, so for the chat show pop quiz. So the first question is, there's 50 points available for each answer. And once the final score is tabulated, it'll be posted on the site with the top 100. The first question is, Sammy Davis Jr. or Ann B. Davis?
This is like, which one you're a fan of?
That's the question.
I'm going to say Ann B. Davis because I grew up with the Brady Bunch.
There you go.
More than I did Sammy.
Yeah. Second question is Carl Weathers or the weather in Carlsbad?
Carl Weathers, for sure.
Correct.
Huge Rocky fan.
Uh-huh. And the final question, Keith?
Hernandez.
Perfect.
Right.
All right.
Because, I mean,
it's a perfect score.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yep.
Mets.
I can't thank you enough, honestly and truly. Enjoy your Chat Show travel mug.
Fantastic.
I hear they're going for about $7 on eBay.
All right, good.
Should
I'm
you
gonna try
decide-
to bump it up?
Yeah.
Yeah, buy some Bitcoin with the proceeds.
That's right. There is our show for today. Brett, everyone's favorite engineer. Thank you again.
Of course, you're welcome.
And the folks here at Earwolf, that's our guest, Larry Sher. That's how you say both his first and last name. And we'll be next live with Jennifer Tilley, an actress I've worked with a couple of times in movies, and now a touring poker professional who is a bracelet winner of the World Series of Poker. And we'll talk about all sorts of things. And again, congratulations to everyone working on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel for the Golden Globe nominations. And go see Father Figures if you enjoy laughing and feeling something in your heart. I can't wait for updates to share with you about the goings-on with that film and my friend Larry Sher. So that's it for today. I want to thank Corey Levin in Post. Until next time, and as always, get out of my face.